Welcome back to another episode of Podcast on the Brink. It's Friday, November 14th. Indiana basketball 3-0 on this young season. Nice to see some upward movement in all the metrics. Nice steady rise here at the beginning of the season in Ken Palm. A lot of excitement about this Indiana basketball team. Joining us on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink, Ryan Corazza of Inside the Hall. Before we get to Ryan on this week's episode, wanted to take a quick second, ask if you have a moment, leave us a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. And our YouTube channel is inching closer to 9,000 subscribers. If you like the video podcast, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. We've kind of mentioned that we're hoping to get to 10,000 subscribers sooner rather than later. So thank you for your continued support there. Ryan, welcome back to the show. Exciting start to the season for IU basketball. Exciting start of the season for the new version of Film Session. The reaction to that's been really strong. I've, as someone that has consumed and edited and read Film Session for a long time, enjoying the new version, the new setup. So thanks for all the updates there. What's kind of been your thoughts on the reaction to that and just how it's been received? It seems like everyone's really enjoying the updates you made in the offseason.
Yeah, honestly, it was a selfish move this offseason because I was really kind of racking my brain to try to figure out how to get a little bit more efficient with it, have it take a little bit less time because sometimes those can be pretty time consuming for me. So it kind of started that way, but as it evolved, I think it's had a dual purpose of both being a little bit less time consuming on myself, a little bit less cognitive load on me, but also a little bit more engaging, a little bit more entertaining, a little bit more conversational. I think just a better product to be putting out there for the readers / watchers of the world out there. So yeah, it's been good and excited to keep it going.
So Indiana 3 wins so far: Alabama A&M, Marquette, and then Milwaukee most recently. None of the three games have been close. I think most of us expected that Marquette would be a stiff test, and it was there for a good portion of the first half before Indiana kind of put some distance between themselves and the Golden Eagles late in the first half, and then kept the lead double figures the entire second half. So it wasn't really a close game. I'm just curious, obviously don't want to talk about the past of Indiana basketball. This is a new chapter, but I'm just curious we've been doing this now since 2007. You've been watching IU basketball since 2002 or 3 at least. What's been kind of your reaction just to the new style of play that Indiana's had so far this season? I'm sure someone that's breaking down this content right in the minute after doing these film sessions, it's been a refreshing way to kind of look at this team now, just from the standpoint of how they're playing, how the ball moves, the 3-point shot, just the offense. I've found myself, as someone who tries to stay as impartial as possible, but it's just been a lot more fun to watch. I feel like that's been the reaction from a lot of the fan base. Do you feel the same way? And kind of what are your early reactions here now that we have 3 games in the books and have some data to look at from this team?
Well, I'd say this. I think it's pretty apparent that there's, I don't know, I guess I would call them surface level observations that are very apparent right in front of your face because of the stark contrast from the last 8 years of this program before Darren DeVries took over. In terms of, as you said, the 3-point shooting, the ball movement, the spacing, the unpredictability of what they're going to do from possession to possession, even within certain actions, they can do a number of things off of them. And I think that's all warranted and true. And, I pretty much agree with it all. It is quite different. But I think for me, I'm also almost more curious about why that's happened, right? And I think this didn't just happen. This wasn't luck. I think Indiana hired a good basketball coach that can run a system from top to bottom, a program and a culture from top to bottom, rather. and he knew exactly what type of player he wanted. And as they kept kind of coming in, you could see, okay, some super high assist rates from guys that he brought in from last season, some great shooting, and a lot of experience. And so this didn't just happen by accident. I think there's a coach that had a plan. He even seems he's, as he said a couple of times, a little bit surprised about how quickly this offense came together. But he definitely had a plan for this. And I think he's also coached that, unlike the last two coaches, understands the assignment of being the coach here in this time and in this era where sort of the fan base is at, where the kind of university is at with everything with the basketball program, and what he needs to do to sort of work the public relations angle a bit, work the crowd a little bit, as it were, but also is running the type of program and the type of offense and has the type of background and experience to actually have Indiana make a name for itself again and get back into the mix. And how high up this team goes this year or during his tenure, I don't know, but I just feel like there's a reason for this and there's a good foundation. And these are sort of the fruits of all that coming to bore here in the first couple games.
So throughout the offseason, as this roster was assembled, I know we talked back in the spring just kind of about that and some of the pieces, but what were your general expectations entering this season? Because we obviously had the sample of games from the Puerto Rico trip. Obviously, neither of us were there, so we couldn't actually. We saw bits and pieces. We saw some highlights. We saw the Marion exhibition, which you can't really take too much out of that, playing what was a severely overmatched opponent. And you had the Baylor exhibition where they had kind of the quirky rules where guys weren't fouling out, and you didn't necessarily know how each team was approaching it because it was a game that didn't count. And so I kind of found myself entering the season thinking, this is a team that has obviously a lot of talent offensively. There's the pieces if everything comes together correctly. And again, there's been 3 games, so I'm not trying to make any grand proclamation that this is a 4 or 5 seed in the tournament. I'm not trying to say anything like that, but I kind of felt like if this team was able to get into the NCAA tournament, that's a strong first season based on kind of where things were the last 2 years. I'm just kind of curious for your thoughts on what you expected when the first game started in terms of what this team would look like, and if you feel any differently in terms of those expectations now that 3 games have been played.
I don't know, man. I feel like, especially in this era, and as you know from doing the top 40 list now with Dylan before the season, it's so hard, especially with how much player movement there is. And so I don't know if I really had a here's what I think this team's going to do, but before the season, and if that shifted at all, because I really didn't know. And I guess that's just my honest answer. I will say that I just think for this program in general, the bar, it's got to be getting into the tournament. I just think that it has to be. And I think with what was assembled before the season, I thought that could be achieved. I didn't think it was like a stamp it guarantee, but it looked like, if you can finish in the top half of the league, et cetera, get 1 or 2, marquee wins in the non-conference, you give yourself a good shot at that. And I thought that this mix of players could do it. And honestly, I would probably still keep right there that I think, I don't know. The weird thing is too, is it's like your personal expectations versus like the narrative that's been put out there. And I think the narrative is this team is overperforming from what they've been prognosticated against. And I think they're also getting a little bit of a buffer because the football team's so good that the expectation. So I feel like going into the season, the expectations were like, it's okay if they don't make the tournament because this is the new team and it's a new coach and we're just kind of getting this foundation set this year. But I think now in these first 3, if we can only narrow in on these first 3 games, I would say that they are exceeding maybe a national or media narrative or just what people were setting the bar for them at. I think that has been exceeded so far. But as you said, it's only a couple of games. But I don't know. I mean, some of this stuff, I don't think Wilkerson and DeVries are both going to be shooting over 50% from three for the rest of the year, but I think that the way that this offense is constructed and this team is constructed, it can carry them on some nights when their weaknesses are being exposed a bit. And I think we've seen that in a couple of these games, right? Like, you can see they're not going to be the best rim protecting team, which is something that was said in the offseason, right? And you can see that this is not the most athletic team, but the style they play and the great shooting that they have, and then getting really easy looks at the rim off of backdoors and all the other stuff that they're doing to get easy shots at the rim and have high percentage 3-point shooters take 3-pointers, it can mask some of your deficiencies because you're so elite at that, at least in these first couple of games. And I think we've seen that over the course of 40 minutes, it's like, it's just a methodical. If a freight train could be methodical, it's just like they just kind of keep coming and coming, and over the course of a game, you're cooked, you know?
Yeah, death by 1,000 cuts maybe is a good way to put it in terms of the approach offensively. What is, I guess, I'm curious to kind of pick your brain a little bit on this, because you break down, like, you come up with a theme pretty much out of every game that you try to hone in on for film session when you're looking at, at a specific thing. One game it might be Trent Sisley. You did one on that. You did Tate and Connerway from the most recent game. You've done a DeVries game. You've done Wilkerson. I'm curious, just for when you look at this offense and when you kind of see the little wrinkles, do you feel like is it, how much of this is just concepts versus sets when you watch this? Are they doing things differently now that the regular season started versus the preseason? Because when DeVries talked about the exhibition games, he was basically like, "I'm not going to open up the full playbook." And now every game, I feel like I'm seeing like a little different wrinkle, whether it be a backdoor cut or kind of how they're setting. And it seems like they'll have 2 or 3 plays a game where they're just getting like an easy basket at the rim. So I'm curious schematically kind of what you're seeing out of what they're doing offensively, and how much of it you feel like is actual sets versus just feel and just letting them play.
Right now, I still don't feel like they're scripting a ton. And I think it's more concepts out of specific areas of the court, right? So, for instance, I think the technical term for this, the technical basketball X's and O's term, is sort of that get split action that they're running, right? Which is either it's often Reed Bailey that's coming up to kind of the slot area, kind of right next to the top of the key and getting the ball. And from there, there's just a lot of things that can happen, right? And it's all dependent on what the defense is doing. And that's what makes it tough, right? Like, if Tucker DeVries is on that strong side with Bailey and he's getting face guarded because he can hit a three very quickly, he's got a quick release, he's got great balance, then he'll just cut backdoor. And because Indiana has all that spacing, he can get an easy layup off that. And Reed Bailey's a great passer, right? But that same exact positioning could happen, and the defender could be off him a little bit, and that pass just comes and he makes the three, or it goes into a dribble handoff from Reed Bailey to him, and Reed Bailey sets a ball screen for then him to get up the quick three. Or sometimes Lamar Wilkerson's also on that strong side, and they're one setting a flare screen for the other. And again, depending on what the defense does, sometimes they feel like they can, the guy setting that flare can slip to the basket for another backdoor, or the three happens. So to me, it's sort of a more, I don't know if read and react's the right term, but it's based on what's happening in the moment, and it's a little bit more feel. And I think because these guys have a lot of experience just playing basketball and are unselfish, it's just about what's being given in any minute, any moment. That I think is what makes this what it is right now. And so, yeah, I wouldn't see, whereas, I know you said it at the top of the pod, I've heard other observers of the program say this too. Like, for me, I don't care about comparing it to past eras, because I also feel like that's how I make sense of what's happening now. And I think the difference is when Indiana ran stuff under Mike Woodson, like, I honestly think like their best offense was often Trey Galloway in a ball screen, and either Ware a couple of seasons ago or Ballo setting that screen. And then it could either be a lob for one of those, the two big men, or Trey Galloway was pretty, depending on the opponent, depending on how good the defense was, he could hit a lot of those runners in the lane. But that was it. It was like they had two each player ran the same path on the court. It's like they're bowling, right? And you got your lane in the slick there, right? You're just throwing it in the same spot, right? And that's what that was. And it was very predictable, but it could still work and they could still win games out of it. Here, I think there's all of these different angles and all of these different, there's so much more variance out of the same action. And that's what makes it so hard to guard. And it's really that it's like a seesaw where it's like, all right, you're going to lean this way. We're going to take it back the other way. We're going to cut to the basket, or otherwise, we're going to shoot the 3-pointer. So there's that. But I also feel like, as I did for today's film session with Connerway, I don't, and, he's 1 for 6 on threes this year. I know he'll probably keep shooting it, but, he didn't have a great percentage, I think, throughout his entire career. And, last year at Troy, but he also offers sort of a counter to that in the way that he can actually drive to the basket, not based off of somebody face guarding him or guarding him behind the 3, because he is, Wilkerson can do it too. I actually think he can drive to the hole pretty well. DeVries, maybe not quite as much as those guys. But Connerway also, as I said in today's film session, has his own sort of unpredictability because of the way that he plays. He's shifty once he gets into the lane, and the way that he was attacking. And they really thought, it sounds like after the game, they really thought against Milwaukee that they could take advantage one-on-one with him. And I think, he had like 9, pretty much 18 of his points came at the basket, either via makes or free throws after he got fouled. So yeah, I don't know. I need to wrap this point up here, but more or less, I think right now it is more out of concepts. And as the season goes along, they might be scripting stuff a little bit more in situations that they need to win games and pull that stuff out of their bag in a way that right now, I just think against these teams, the concepts are enough to be getting them through.
Yeah, to kind of put a bow on that point, I was thinking as you talked, it kind of reinforces the fact that, you mentioned earlier, DeVries had a plan for what he wanted to do, to get a specific type of guy, and to be able to execute like what they're doing, they had to make sure that they found the right pieces. So to me, that tells me that they had a plan and that they were looking for a specific type of player rather than, again, trying to just throw as much talent out there as possible and hope the pieces fit together. Maybe you go after, a little bit less talented piece. Connor Enright's an example of this. People wondered kind of early in the season, like what's going to be his role. He doesn't shoot. But you watch him during the game. He always knows where he's supposed to be. He's a willing passer. He plays hard on both ends of the court. And, he stepped up and made a couple shots the last one game. It was a half court shot, but last game he was wide open, made a 3-pointer. So I like the idea of recruiting to the system and finding the pieces that you have to have in order for your plan to work, rather than just trying to get guys and hope that you figure it out later. So that's been really impressive to me. I'm curious for your thoughts on just through these first 3 games, anything that is a concern just in terms of when the schedule toughens up. It's been, we've talked a lot about the rim protection and rebounding. I'm sure those will come to mind. Is there anything else that you look at and say, this is something that needs to get better, or something that gives you pause in terms of when they get into the Big Ten play that could give them problems?
Depth, maybe. They've been able to split out the minutes pretty well. If you look after games, it's not like guys are playing 38, 39 minutes. But right now, I think, and look, he's not going to be playing 10 guys. I don't think that's what Darren DeVries is going to do, but, and I'm wondering, so yeah, I would say depth right now, because if Reed Bailey gets into foul trouble, Sam Alexis, I think in some games is going to be probably a better matchup, but that sort of front court role, somewhat for, we say rim protection, but I just think in general, there are going to be matchups where Reed Bailey is going to be matched up on somebody, and it's going to be a pretty big mismatch, right? And we've seen that a little bit already, especially with him as the starter. I just don't think he has, he's got a lot of great attributes and he fits this system, and this is why he's on the team and this is why he's starting. But he doesn't have much physicality, right? And I think Alexis is a guy that does. And so I'm interested to see as the season goes along, sort of where the minutes are dispersed when they might need somebody that's a little bit more physical. That said, as this is an old Tom Creanism, but it's like, well, they got to match up with us too, right? So if you got to be guarding Reed Bailey out on the perimeter and all those sorts of things, it can maybe counteract it a little bit for yourself. So yeah, I'd say depth, and really how Nick Dorn fits into things as well right now, because I think he did get those couple minutes against Milwaukee, but it's almost like this is going so well. And he seems to be, you know, from all accounts, is been shooting the ball really well in practice, and it can fit into the system as well. But it's like, well, where does he actually slot in, and how does that maybe affect things? Because it does seem like he's going to be a rotation piece, and you know, could be sort of the first guy off the bench, and that might move Sicily back a little bit. So maybe just trying to figure out the depth and where some of these pieces beyond you know, DeVries or Wilkerson are sort of fitting within the system, and also how that also sort of rolls up to the larger picture of a Big Ten season, where sometimes matchup dependent, it's going to be a pretty different stylistic clash between the types of players that they have on the court versus what they might have to match up with.
You mentioned Sicily. He's been one of the bigger, I don't want to say surprises, but we saw a little bit from his stats down in Puerto Rico that he was going to be a guy that came in and made an impact, but didn't play great in the Baylor game, but really played excellent against Marquette. When watching the film on him, I think you made a comment on this on maybe on the film session that you did that featured him. He's not a guy that really needs the ball to be effective, because he knows kind of what his role is and how to move away from the ball. He's a capable 3-point shooter. To me, he's a guy that, you know, if Indiana, you know, can build a program where they're bringing in freshmen, developing over time, by the time he's a junior, senior, can be a really special player, but already capable right now of making an impact. What have been your impressions of Sicily so far through the first 3 games, and what kind of role do you think he can have on this team this season? You mentioned maybe going maybe for less minutes in certain games when they may need guys like Dorn and Miles off the bench, but to me he's valuable from the standpoint of he gives you a little bit more size than those guys, and maybe a little bit better rebounder. And to me, he's a guy that should be, for the duration of the season, playing that 15 to 20-minute range pretty consistently.
Well, wow, what a different world he walked into than maybe him and his family were expecting. You know, this time last year, I mean, I think he committed sometime in the fall last year, right? Yeah,
Yeah, September. Yeah.
yeah. I think he's really in a great spot for a freshman, which, as you said, and which I've previously alluded to, that he doesn't have to do anything other than play off of Indiana's main players in this offense. And it's a great spot for him to be in, because I think, you know, there's been mistakes on the court here and there, don't get me wrong, but he's in the right place at the right time. He knows where he's supposed to fit off of, if the defense is keying on a Wilkerson or DeVries, he's cutting. He's getting baskets at the rim. He's shown an ability to hit the 3-pointer. I think defensively, he's held up pretty decently too. And I also think just learning from, you know, Tucker DeVries this year, as they're, you know, I don't know if they're kind of similar players, just shooters with some size and what have you. So I think being in this system on this team with these seniors is going to be invaluable for him this year. And he's showing that he already belongs. I also feel like, yeah, as this goes along, he's the type of player too that I think in the Woodson era was missing in terms of the sweet spot for recruiting. Those not top 5-star tier guys, but somewhere in that, whatever, 40 to 100 range, where these are guys that can grow with you, if, you know, in this age, if they stick around, if they don't transfer out. And they can grow with you. And those are guys that, as they become juniors and seniors, are great players, and they really know what they're doing. They know the system. They have the experience. They've been there. They're battle tested. And I think when you combine a guy like Trent Sisley with maybe some lighter use, you know, they're still going to be using the portal, but maybe a little bit lighter use of the portal. And DeVries has said he kind of wants a little bit more of a balance. Obviously this year with what's available in the portal, it's the best way to build a competitive team immediately. Sometimes it doesn't always work. So yeah, I think it's a great situation for him to be in, and it's a worlds away from what he might have been walking into otherwise this year.
Yeah, interesting thought there just about the portal in general. But I was thinking about this the other day myself. You look at some of the guys Indiana brought in, specifically, let's focus on somebody like Lamar Wilkerson. He has been so impactful for Indiana, really on both ends of the court. Specifically, though, offensively, just with his ability to get to the line and also, make the 3-point shot, really can score from anywhere. But compare him to maybe some of the other freshmen around the country that were McDonald's All-Americans, 5-star type kids. I'd much rather have a 23-year-old Lamar Wilkerson than I would a 18-year-old freshman. Maybe there's more upside as the season goes along for that freshman to grow into a special player, but from what I'm seeing out of Wilkerson right now, he's pretty darn good in his role. And to me, a lot of it's interesting to me. Like Indiana played Marquette, and in doing research for that game, I came upon the stat that Shaka, I think this is like his 4th or 5th year at Marquette. He's taken 2 transfers. And to me, in this era of basketball, as much as DeVries talks about wanting to build through the high school ranks, he's going to sign 2 players this fall. But I think in order to kind of stay in at top of the sport and in the long term, you're going to have to continue to get guys like Lamar Wilkerson. Tucker DeVries obviously was kind of a tap in putt because he's the coach's son. He was going to come, but guys like Wilkerson, Reed Bailey, Tate Connerway, I think the best programs on a year in year out basis. Again, unless you're going to recruit all 5-star kids and get them, you're going to have to get 3 or 4 of these guys on a yearly basis to have the best team, and that may just be how it is. So that kind of way of program building, I think, is here to stay.
Yeah, and it's also end games for some of these guys, right? Like if you think traditionally in college basketball, recruiting a 5-star McDonald's All-American, you might only have him for 1 year, right? And it's and he's a freshman, and that might be it. Now, that's conversely, that could be the same if you go out and get a senior in the portal, right? But all that experience, all that college basketball experience that a senior has or a super senior has versus a McDonald's All-American that might be still finding his way a little bit and then maybe breaks out during the conference season. Who would you rather have? And I think it's been shown that, yeah, getting very tenured, experienced players has been very helpful for programs. And so yeah, it's just another change in this era where I think these guys that have sort of been more college basketball lifers and through the ringer with it, as opposed to like a 18-year-old star, the balance there is different in a way that I think pre-portal era, you'd say, oh, we want to stack as many 5-stars as we can because that's kind of the only way to maybe get upper talent. But a longer tenure guy could still kind of net out to be better for your team over the course of the season.
Yeah, and some of these guys, quite frankly, are just more hungry that have come from these programs at the mid to lower major level. I mean, look at Tate Connerway's journey. He played at 2 junior colleges, then he went to Troy, was 6th man of the year there his first year, kind of waited his turn. Last year was Sun Belt Player of the Year. Now he's at Indiana. He's probably had people telling him for 5 or 6 years, "You're never going to be, a high major player. You're better off playing JUCO, small college." Now he's getting a chance to play at Indiana. This is not to take anything away from some of these 5-star kids, but it's just a different mentality than what some of these kids are recruited from the time they're 14 or 15. They're already on draft boards for 2029 and beyond. They have people telling them, "Hey, you're going to go to college. You're going to be there for 6 months. Then you're going to get paid." Whereas, again, a lot of these guys, Lamar Wilkerson and Tate Connerway are 2 guys I'm thinking of specifically. Just not that way. Even Connor Enright. I mean, he was recruited by Drake out of high school. Probably never thought he was going to play. I mean, his brother went to IU. He told me before that he kind of grew up watching IU games. Was always a fan. He probably never thought he was going to get a chance to play there. So these guys get to this opportunity, and they're more hungry to, show what they can do and show that they belong. So, and I've sensed that too, just from this is just kind of like my observations, having a chance to talk face to face with these guys once before they went to the Puerto Rico and then once at media day. you can just tell the way that they talk about the opportunity to play at IU that they're genuinely excited to be there and to be on the stage. I mean, that goes for most of them that I had a chance to talk to. Whereas in the past, there's been transfers where these are guys that are just clearly there only for the NIL. And I'm not saying it has to do with all these guys clearly are coming to IU in part because of NIL, but I also think the mentality is a little bit different from these guys that have played at a lower level and are hungry to show that they can belong on this stage. So, last thing I wanted to ask you about, just in general with this team, who maybe from an individual standpoint, when you've kind of broken down the film, who's been the most fun to watch in your eyes, just in terms of how they operate on the court and um, some of maybe the little wrinkles that they've shown in their game. For me, it's been Tucker DeVries because he's not a superb athlete, but I watched him warm up at the Baylor exhibition game in Indy. I think at one point he was like in the corner, like ripped off 20 threes in a row. And I was sitting next to Scott Agnes, who's covered the Pacers for a long time. And I said to him, I was like, how's this guy? I mean, it's 6'7" and 225. How's this guy not on the NBA radar? He said he's gonna be. You know, he's gonna. I look at the NBA now, and I look at guys like a Duncan Robinson at Michigan that has made a ton of money in the NBA. Like he's an elite shooter, and I look at DeVries, just the way he's not the most athletic guy, but he plays at his own pace and he doesn't get sped up by anybody else. Like when he catches the ball, he knows like what he wants to do, whether it's pass or if he's got someone smaller on him, he can size them up and he's never in a rush. To me, it's just a lot of fun to watch because you can tell from a basketball perspective and the way he thinks about the game. He's a coach's son, and the way he just kind of dissects people on the offensive end is just a different level than what we've seen in recent seasons for IU basketball. I'm curious, just kind of when you watch this team, if you have any additional thoughts on DeVries, or if there's anybody else that's kind of stood out to you in terms of having a lot of fun watching so far.
Well, that first half against Marquette, when DeVries got on that heater, was insane. And that was, if you want to talk NBA, some of those shots that he hit, especially that one coming off, maybe it's like a double pin down, like on the
Left side,
run,
yeah.
on the left side, hitting that three on the move was, I mean, that's pro stuff right there. It just is. So I think that first half when he really had it going and he scored in a variety of ways was probably the most fun to watch. But I mean, I think because when I think about the last several years of point guards as well, and sort of maybe the promise versus the reality of some of these players. I mean, obviously, Jalen Hood-Schifino had his moments and could really get it going in some games as sort of the mid-range master. But Conaway is just fun because just his shiftiness, the way he's just kind of unique in the way that he moves. And I also, you could say maybe kind of plays at his own pace too, or kind of does his own thing, so to speak. So I've really enjoyed him as well, because I think that that's the type of player that I know sometimes this is something on a pod you talked about over the summer, just in terms of sometimes these lower level guys that move up that were good at scoring at the basket. Sometimes that doesn't always translate. Against Milwaukee on Wednesday night, it did. We'll see as it does into the Big Ten season. But I think as long as his offense keeps giving space, he'll have some opportunities. And I've been enjoying watching his style of play as well.
Well, thanks again for taking the time, Ryan. Always good to have you here on the show. Just wanted to say one more time, really enjoying the new version of Film Session. Always enjoy reading and editing the minute after. I know the IU fans are feel the same way. So thanks again for taking the time to join us on this week's episode.
Always. Hey, everybody out there, like and subscribe,
Yeah, for sure. And leave us a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those numbers, Ryan, I check them every week. They go up incrementally every week, but
there we go.
Our downloads have been strong now for a good portion of this year, and want to continue to grow the show and the channel. So appreciate everybody's support, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.